Hello, and welcome to the Faith and Sustainability Podcast. I am your host, Leonard Robinson. This podcast is a project of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta Laudato Si Initiative. On this podcast, we will go on a journey to explore the role of the Catholic Church and other faiths' impact in sustainability. Experts, theologians, and thought leaders will share their opinions and perspectives as guests on the podcast. Sustainability focuses on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. The concept of sustainability is composed of three pillars: social, environmental, and economic, also known as people, planet, and prosperity. This podcast is made possible with the generous funding and support from the Archbishop's Annual Appeal, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, Rutherford Seidel, Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, the Sustainable Environmental Management Company, St. Francis Services, and the time, treasure, and talent from several individuals. The Faith and Sustainability Podcast is coming to you from the Archdiocese of Atlanta Chancery in Smyrna, Georgia. We're blessed to have Rob Watson on the Faith and Sustainability Podcast. Watson is a principal with the Upland Road Developers, which develops waste separation and processing complexes called Sustainable Materials Advanced Recovery Technology, or SMART Centers. He is known as the founding father of leadership in energy and environmental design, also known as LEED, the most widely used green building rating system in the world. Under Rob's direction, LEED became the largest and fastest growing international standard by which green buildings are measured. Author Thomas Friedman called Rob one of the best environmental minds in America. Rob is a graduate of Dartmouth College, where he was named one of the 25 most influential alumni in the school's 250-year history. Rob also has an MBA from Columbia University and an MS from UC Berkeley. He is married to Green School Alliance founder Margaret Howard Watson and has a 20-year-old son, Max. Along with being the founding father of LEED, he is the founder and president of the Solid Waste Environmental Excellence Performance, or also known as SWEEP standards. It's the only national voluntary sustainability standard for the solid waste industry. I'll let Rob tell us about it a little bit later. So it's great to have Rob on because we're going to talk about the Jewish perspective on sustainability. So Rob, welcome to the Faith and Sustainability Podcast.
Very exciting to be here, Leonard. I really appreciate the invitation to talk with you today.
Okay, great. Well, let's get right to it. What inspired you to create standards like LEED and SWEEP?
Well, on the wall in my office, and it's a recent discovery, but I actually found it in the Pearls Before Swine comic strip, and it's called The Genius Prayer. And it goes as follows. God grant me the courage to change things that I can't accept. And I was noticing that during my career at the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, and in courses that I'd taken in college where I majored in energy policy, that buildings were tremendous sources of pollution, the materials that go into them, all the manufacturing energy, all of the energy consumed during their operations. Turns out they are the most polluting human activity on the planet. And so as I was working on building codes and standards, et cetera, the founders of the U.S. Green Building Council reached out to me and said, how about if you join the Green Building Council? And I'm like, well, what's a green building? And I asked 10 different people in the field and I got 10 different answers. So I realized that we were going to have an intelligent conversation about buildings and sustainability. We needed a standard or some, frame of reference. So spent 10 years, if you will, wandering in the Sinai, trying to figure out what a green building standard would look like. And with a lot of help of a lot of smart people, a lot of dedicated volunteers, we developed the LEED system and launched it and started running it like a business, if you will. And then fast forward 20 years, and I had an opportunity to get involved with the waste industry. And in sort of researching what the main issues were, I realized that it was in a very similar place to where buildings were 30 years ago. And in spite of the fact of recycling and putting your bottles out for collection had been part of the environmental canon for 50 years, there were actually no standards around program development, what constitutes recycling, how to define materials in the waste stream, et cetera. So I realized that this was an opportunity to begin creating a framework for sustainable materials management. And that's what led to the creation of the SWEEP standard.
It goes back to if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So 2 excellent examples. Thank you for that. Tell us about your connection to the environment.
Well, I think some of my relatives knew that I was going to be an environmentalist before I did. Maybe it was things that they had observed in me, but my uncle and aunt would always give my brother these cool T-shirts, which I really, coveted. But I got like Ranger Rick magazine and nature stories, and it's just something that's always spoken to me. I love being outdoors. I feel a connection with a capital C when I'm in nature. And, I think it is that connection and my desire for that connection that really has bound me to this lifelong mission.
Well, on this show, people have heard me talk about Laudato Si. That's the Catholic roadmap to sustainability. What is the relationship of Judaism and sustainability?
I think it's a somewhat nascent activity in Judaism. One of the rabbis at my temple just put together and was introduced by my wife to Karenna Gore, who's doing a lot of work, I believe, in the Catholic faith to promote sustainability. And together they put together a whole book around, and the book is called Sacred Earth, around sort of Judaism and sustainability. So I think, even though there are many festivals and a lot of indirect conversation, both in the Bible and in the Talmud, which is sort of the interpretation of the Bible around sustainability and sustainable practices as, part of daily life, that there's nothing formal like Laudato Si in Judaism, at least none that I've come across.
You mentioned the book Sacred Earth. What is the book about?
Yeah, so it's a very comprehensive look at sustainability, and that's environmental, it's social, it's sort of, the triple bottom line element of sustainability in the context of Jewish faith. And, there are a number of practices in Judaism that, could be seen as aligned with sustainability. I mean, if you look at the most sacred Jewish holiday, which is Yom Kippur, and it's called the Day of Atonement. But if you look at the word atone, you could separate it and use it to you could express it as at one. So instead of having kind of obviously, you're seeking to align yourself with the divine, with divine law, with your higher purpose and higher being. And that sort of, to me, has a very strong stewardship component where, we are, along with many others, God's creatures, and that, if we truly respect God and his or her creation, then the exploitation of natural places, the exploitation of other people, the exploitation of other species is quite frankly a sin. And so when we go, so we should, be always looking to atone or at one ourselves with the wider world and God's creation. So that's what that whole, that period of reflection, how do I align myself with God, with what God wants for us, and so that's, it's a very important annual sort of reminder.
Now, you wrote a very good chapter in Sacred Earth called Radical Confidence. What is radical confidence?
It is essentially an unshakable belief in a positive future. So, a friend of mine, Amory Lovins, says, in the end, everything will be okay. If things are not okay, then it's not the end. Radical confidence is investing in things that will continue producing positive results long after you're gone. Planting trees, honestly, is an act of radical confidence, because, by the time the tree matures, it's unlikely that you will see much, if any, of its, fruits. But what you're doing is you're creating beauty. If it's a fruit tree, you're creating, food, service, biodiversity, for the future, right? So it's an act today that represents your ultimate hope for the future. And in so doing, you are making a radical statement that things are going to be okay. And given everything that's going on these days, one could be forgiven for thinking that, everything being okay in the end is a radical thought.
Well, what are some of the Jewish practices that protect the environment?
Well, I think one of the key words, and you can argue whether it's a misinterpretation or a mistranslation or not, but in Exodus, the Jews are given sort of direction to have dominion over the creatures, right? And I think dominion can have an aspect of sort of control and domination and extraction, or it can have more of a interpretation of stewardship and of participation and respect. And I think if we move more towards the stewardship concept of quote dominion, then I think that we can find much more alignment between humans and the rest of the world.
Now, what does sustainability mean to you, and how does your faith impact your perspective of it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, just seeing the complexity and interaction of everything, I have a science background, but to me, none of this makes sense without God. Look, God gave us the ability to look at science and create medicine and do all these things. And so I don't see a separation between science and faith, for example. If you will, God created the rules, and it's our job to figure them out and follow them. And so to me, it really is about being aligned with this incredible gift that we've been given, not only in terms of the planet around us, but ourselves. The amazing ineffability of having a soul, and yet it's in this confined body, right? I mean, that's just an amazing thing, is to have that duality. But that duality, I think, can make us a little schizophrenic sometimes. But so it's really important to think about, the bigger picture, the higher picture, the higher purpose, rather than the baser instincts that, our bodies are always driving us towards every day. So again, to me, sustainability is about living up to our highest potentials as human beings.
Okay, what are some of your personal practices for sustainability?
I never close lights, turn on, I never keep lights on in a room that I'm not using. I close the refrigerator door instead of leaving it open. Never leave the water running when I brush my teeth, or I take cold showers a lot of times. It's actually really good for your health, but I just try not to be wasteful, right? Waste not, want not. I take all my food scraps and bring them down to my garden, and I recycle everything. I don't own a car. I take public transit 90% of the time. I'm not perfect, but we've got LED light bulbs all over the house, and any appliances that are replaced with best in class. But really try to not overconsume, but I'm also not going to freeze in the dark either.
Now, the temple where you worship, do they practice sustainability? Do they have a program, or is it integrated into everyday actions?
That is a work in progress. In part inspired by this book, we are beginning to do a little bit more formality in the sustainability practices of the temple. And it's just, they will sponsor a lot of events. They do, a lot of cleanup, a lot of, sort of social sustainability. And they're the annual temple funds that are raised can do go to conservation and restoration efforts. But I think working on a more formal program is in the future.
Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end, so why don't you give us a call to action to our listeners?
So I think the important thing to understand is that, we are in a very, very precarious position as humans. The Earth is going to be fine. The question is whether humans will be fine with it, or whether we will create conditions that are not sustainable for us to thrive. Chemistry, biology, and physics are the laws of the planet. Chemistry, biology, and physics were created by God. So on some level, we need to bring our social, economic, political systems in alignment with the laws of the planet, because, nature is very simple. You either fit in or get kicked out. And so the question is, are you being moral and fulfilling God's will if you are over-consuming resources today for your own personal comfort at the expense of future generations and, the resources that we were endowed with on the planet? And so living within our means is really important, and that it requires, investigation and scrutiny in all aspects of our life all the time. And so I'm always looking to adjust my own practices, my own behaviors, to ensure that I'm in line there. I don't succeed 100% of the time, but at least I'm always trying.
Okay, sounds good. That's all we can do. Well, Rob, it's been great having you on the Faith and Sustainability podcast. It's great working with you. And I'm sure that some of the comments you made and some of the information, people want to know more. So how about some contact information for you?
If people want to get a hold of me regarding waste, I can be contacted at rob.watson@sweepstandard.org. And I'm happy to share my thoughts about that and general sustainability. So I think that's probably the best. And if you want to learn more about the work that Leonard and I are doing in waste, you can go to www.sweepstandard, SWEEP, and the word standard.org, and learn more about the system we're putting together.
Okay, well, hey, great talking to you. We've got to do this again.
Looking forward to it. I really appreciate you for doing this important work, and thank you for the invitation.
And thank you as well. You take care, Rob.
All right, Leonard, take care. See you soon.
You've been listening to the Archdiocese of Atlanta Faith and Sustainability Podcast from the Chancery at the Archdiocese in beautiful Smyrna, Georgia. On behalf of those that make this podcast possible, I am your host, Leonard Robinson. Meet me next week on the corner of faith and sustainability. May the Lord be with you.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2023.